Shalom, giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachakwarash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations as always to the elect. News and prophecy, linking to things happening here in Babylon the Great, all right, as well as throughout the four corners of the earth, to the Holy Scriptures, giving the elect of Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, the remnant of Israel, understanding as to what's happening, as things can become too much and get too convoluted. We simplify these things by linking it to biblical prophecy, giving you comfort. And as the scriptures say, wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and the strength of salvation is centered around the fear of the Lord. All right, perfect your fear. All right, and call on the names as much as possible. Pray. All right, repent, because things are getting ready to get crazy, as we already see it happening, as we are at the end of Esau's world. We know biblically it's marked by a great division. It's marked by many things, but one of the many things that end time prophecy is centered around is, the division between the EU, NATO, and Babylon the Great. As Babylon the Great has had its role as the head of this beast system and all of the policies and, things that are being done, even a lot of the wars that the EU and NATO, help aid Babylon the Great, as well as the small hats in. We're living in a time where things are changing. A lot of it is theater, but we have to understand that this is theater associated with biblical prophecy and the effects and signs, all right, that are associated with prophecy coming to pass. As we can see here, the European Union has rejected Trump's Ukraine peace deal. All right. And this is one of many disagreements that you are seeing in these latter days between the EU, the beast, all right, and the whore, America. All right. There's also disagreements with NATO. This thing called America, this whole MaGa movement is divided and separated, which we'll get into some of that as well. And these devils are on their way out. Okay. The only way to end these particular conflicts is war. And that's just how Esau Edom gets down. Okay. And the elites, all right, are at odds. They all agree on the concept of the New World Order, but who's going to lead the pack? Who's going to have what? Who's going to, be at the head of the whole AI, fiasco. They don't agree on a lot, and things are getting ready to get out of hand. Okay. Now let's get the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter and the 19th verse. Okay. Because we know that the fourth beast is Rome, but in the latter days, Rome would be revived as well as its vassals. Okay. And that's fulfilled in Babylon the Great, the new modern day Roman Empire, as well as the vassals or subordinate, countries that make it a beast system. Okay. This is the book of Daniel 7:19. It says, "Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron," meaning the Roman military, because remember, Esau Edom was blessed with the sword, and his nails of brass, which devoured, all right, going into their, great, powerful military, which has now been revived. All right. And it's even more immaculate. Okay. So what the Lord is doing in these latter days is, since these devils have so much of a grip on the earth and the military is so powerful, what he's doing is dividing that sword against each other. Okay. And we're seeing a decay from the inside. So, to put it in simple terms, we're seeing decay of the beast system from the inside. Even over here in Babylon the Great, you're seeing decay from the inside. It said, "was devoured and break in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet." And this is what Rome was able to do. Remember, Rome is what gave this beast system its seat, power, and authority. It started with the Greeks, all right, but Rome is what gave them their dominant power and name in the earth. And we know that, the Western Roman Empire fell, all right, but the Renaissance period marked, all right, the revival of those Greco-Roman principles in the earth. Okay, that started in Italy, okay, and from there, the Spanish, the French, the British, Babylon the Great, the small hats, all right, are all continuing this colonization of the earth, and they want to take it even further, all right, by conquering souls, fighting against, the chosen people via this NWO, and also fighting against who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ with their technology, with their left-handed blessing. It says in the 10 horns, which symbolize the EU, which is now made up of about, 28 countries, okay, which were in his head, and the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell. Now in, the ancient time, all right, these 10 horns were speaking of the vassals, all right, or the subordinate countries that align themselves with Rome. Okay, so you can be outside of Rome, all right, and still be in Rome, just like you can be outside of here, America, Babylon the Great, but you go to different, countries that are, under their rule and who are aligned with them, all right, and you can see pretty much the same principles, all right. The idea of Rome spread beyond Rome itself, all right, but as they conquered, they aligned many of these different, countries to themselves. Now it says, and of the other which came up, the other which came up symbolizes the revival of, all right, the fourth beast. And before whom 3 fell, the Spanish, the French, and the British fell, leading to the, which is the Revolutionary Wars, okay, leading to the independence of Babylon the Great, the 13 colonies, which eventually became the 50 United States, which is still pretty much technically controlled out of, the UK British, okay, but it says, even of that horn that had eyes, all right, meaning they're mere men, all right, but they parade themselves around as gods, okay, their science, their technology, right, they're mortal men, all right, but they're elevating themselves to the level and status of a god. All right. The pride of their heart have deceived them, and the mouth that spake very great things. All right. And we're seeing those very great things being spoken via their science and their technology, their technocracy. OK, the talking point of putting microchips in people, the carbon footprint tracking, and just complete Godhead on the earth in a way that no tyrant has ever ruled, whose look was more stout than his fellows. Okay. And his fellows represent, the EU and Nato countries, right? And all that are aligned unto him. His look, all right, Babylon the Great's look, right, is more stout, okay, than his fellows. Okay. The word for stout is, all right, rabbah, great, okay, captain, chief, and America's acted as chief of this whole beast system. All right, but we're living in a time where, the tides are changing. They're growing, impatient with the pride of Babylon the Great, growing impatient with the pride of the small hats, and it's leading to a divide. All right. Even when we say small hat, it's not just the state of Israel, but you also have to understand Ukraine. Those are small hats, and the least of the flock are drawing out all of these different nations into conflict. All right. And disagreements. So Babylon the Great, all right, is more numerous than, more abundant than, greater than the rest of his European counterparts. Okay. and they hate each other. You go over to Europe and you hear how they talk about Babylon the Great, all right, and how dumb you Americans are. America thinks that, Europe is uppity, but overall in policy and economics, they don't agree. They do have the power of the sword, all right, but they don't agree on a lot of things, which brings us to biblical prophecy being fulfilled. Okay, so his look was more stout than his fellows. Okay, let's look up the word stout in this sense. Heavy build, strong and thick. Okay. Fat, fattish, plump, round. They've waxed fat. Well covered, well padded. Okay. Strong, sturdy. Okay. Vigorous, forceful, stout-hearted, courageous, valiant, heroic. So of this beast system, America is known as the more dominant. Okay. But pursuant to end time prophecy, you get Daniel, the second chapter. We'll jump down to around the 40th verse. And even these scholars know that this is talking about Rome and how it's described, which when you get Revelation, the 13th chapter, it tells you the end of it was as the feet of a bear, symbolizing Russia, and their latter day importance and the end of this beast system, which we're going to get into a few things as well with Russia, because there's a lot happening, which, the powers that be make sure to keep your minds and your timelines full of, confusion and, bread and circuses and, things that really don't matter, to keep you divided, to keep your attention. But really what's happening is, a collapse, and they're definitely coming with the NWO. Second, this is Daniel, the second chapter and the 40th verse. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, Rome, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. All right, what we see America, Babylon the Great doing throughout the four corners of the earth now, Rome was able to do it in the territories that they dominated. You see, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And this is what Rome was able to do. They broke in pieces. They conquered the nations. They conquered, the Jews. They bruised Yahushai, took down the nations. And it goes further to say, and whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, which are the end of this particular statue that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about. The statue represents, all right, the, Europe and Babylon the Great in the latter days, as Rome will be revived. So whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part potter's clay and part iron. So part clay and part iron, meaning they and if you have a iron metal and you try to put some clay on it, they're not going to bind together. Okay. The kingdom shall be divided. And what does the scripture say about a kingdom divided? Okay. Salakia. A kingdom divided is going to fall. Okay. Kingdom divided. Let's just type that in. It's in the book of Mark, I believe. Okay. This is a good one. Yeah. Matthew 12 and 25. And Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought into desolation, and every city or house divided shall not stand. Okay. Mark 3 and 24 is a good one. Okay. So get it in the NLT. And we'll get right into these articles and these videos. Try to get through it. Mark 3 and 24, a kingdom divided by civil war will collapse. And we're seeing infighting and civil war amongst these devils, man. Okay? That's what we're getting ready to get into. Okay? Whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, Daniel 2:41, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. See? It shall be divided. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron, which is the sword. They're blessed with the sword, but it's divided for as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. So, they have the sword, but economically, politically, morally, they don't agree. Technology-wise, they don't agree with who's going to be at the forefront, what money should go where. You got America balking at, NATO saying y'all need to put, more money into the pot for, defense. The NATO and the EU are tired of all of these useless, endless wars, started by Babylon and the small hat. It's just a complete divide. Okay, the kingdom shall be divided. Okay, and when you look up this word divided in the Hebrew, it's peleg or palag, to divide, to be divided. Okay, to be split. Okay, let's get the book of Obadiah. And we're going to go to verse 7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border, and the men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and have prevailed against thee. And Russia plays a big part in these EU and NATO nations, going rogue and breaking the covenants and bonds that they had. And they that eat thy bread, that have taken on to this dollar, this debt, have laid a wound under thee, and there is no understanding in him. And you could say BRICS is a part of that. All right. Even though we know the dominance of the dollar is supreme still, everything's on a decline. Okay. Now, as you see, EU reject Trump's Ukraine peace deal. This is one of many of their divides here in these latter days, because EU and NATO are America's closest allies. Along with the United Air, the UAE, okay, the so-called Arabs, okay, Saudi Arabia, but they're going their own way, and pretty much we're looking at Babylon being forsaken, all right, for the purpose of war being waged against her, and the small hats have a lot to do with that, okay. So the EU has rejected the Ukraine peace deal drafted by the White House, all right, and put forward its own set of conditions for a potential agreement. All right, now we're going to go here. Trump completely botches Ukraine-Russia peace, all right, and massive loss, all right.
All right, so we got to talk a little bit about Russia and Ukraine, guys. We got to talk about this. So I don't know how many of you guys remember this, but a few months back, Trump decided to basically twist Ukraine's arm into doing this incredibly biased deal with America. And the idea behind the deal is like, hey, you guys have to give us 50% of your shit from now until forever in return for continued U.S. arms flows so you can keep fighting Russia, and in return for our support, okay? And this was a big deal because the media was talking about it like, oh, it's deal-making, smart Trump deal-making. And if you go back and watch the segments we did at the time, I called it, like, basically new age colonialism. Like, the terms we were forcing onto Ukraine were worse than, like, the fucking Treaty of Versailles, right? Like, this is something that's too harsh even for the terms you put on a country after they lose a war. Like, that's how bad it is. Like, taking 50% of all of their natural resources and their oil and their natural gas and their ports and shit like that, that is fucking crazy. But again, the deal was, you give us this, and in return, you have our support. You can get our weapons, you have our support in your fight against Russia. Okay. Well, guess what? Now, everybody's acting like that never happened. We never had that deal made. And now Trump is coming up with a new plan to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. But there's a bunch of problems. So let's start with this. Axios has this piece, Trump's full 28-point Ukraine-Russia peace plan. President Trump's 28-point plan for peace in Ukraine would force Kyiv to give up additional territory in the east, additional territory that Russia doesn't have now, cap the size of its military, and agree will never join NATO, according to a draft obtained by Axios and verified by a Ukrainian official, a U.S. official, and source familiar with the proposal. The U.S. side is pushing Ukraine to make a deal on an aggressive timeline, and despite the plan including proposals Ukraine has repeatedly rejected up to now, President Zelensky is not ruling it out. A senior White House official acknowledged the plan is not easy for Ukraine, but said the U.S. believes the war must end, and that if it doesn't, Ukraine is likely to lose even more territory. The plan was drafted by Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff, oh boy, with input from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Jared Kushner. Now let me just pause here to say, red flag, Steve, bro, red flag. Steve Witkoff has been profiting off of these global deals up to this point. They're directly involved with like business dealings where like they're making a tremendous amount of money in crypto, for example. Jared Kushner got $2 billion from the Saudi government in return for allegedly giving them classified information that led to MBS consolidating power. These people are insanely corrupt. You have a neocon hawk and two insanely corrupt freaks who are steering this process. Reddest of red flags I've ever seen, dog. Witkoff also consulted with Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev on the plan. Dmitriev told Axios he's optimistic about it because, unlike past efforts, we feel the Russian position is really being heard. President Putin has not publicly endorsed the plan. After meeting with Dmitriev, Witkoff and Kushner also discussed the plan with Zelensky's national security advisor, Rustem Umerov. U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll presented the plan to Zelensky on Thursday in writing. Afterwards, Zelensky said he was prepared to hold talks about it with Trump and his team. They go on to say something chilling, which is like, oh, we're going to solve this just like we got a ceasefire in Gaza. Okay,
yeah,
but
right.
That was fake. That wasn't real. 1,500 buildings in Gaza have been destroyed since the fake ceasefire. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed since the fake ceasefire. Just yesterday, dozens of Palestinians were killed in airstrikes. It's not real. It's fake. So this, again, Democrats, don't let them get away with this bullshit. This is kayfabe. This is acting. This is not real. Okay, so what's in the deal? Well, what's in the deal is, like we said, 28-point peace plan. And right off the bat, Kyiv has to cede additional territory. Ukraine has to give up extra territory. To me, right off the bat, that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. That goes above and beyond just to like freeze the lines where they are now. It's like, no, you actually have to retreat from other areas that are currently Ukraine and give that to Russia. Okay. Cap its military at 600,000 personnel.
Supposedly Russia, has, a blackmailing on Donald Trump. Okay, I don't know the truth of it, but supposedly, Putin has the goods on, Trump's freakiness. Okay, so moves are being made that seem like they're pro-Russia. But again, this is all going to fall apart. It's all going to go bad for Babylon the Great because they've done too much wickedness and continue to do wickedness.
That also seems kind of crazy, especially when Russia just invaded Ukraine illegally and offensively, and now Ukraine has to cap its military. Why wouldn't Russia have to cap its military in that scenario? They're the aggressor.
And the talking point of, Russia being the aggressor, there's a lot of propaganda with that. But remember, NATO, promised, not to push any more towards the east, any more towards Russia. Okay. And they've broken that deal numerous times. Okay. Which pretty much, how do you think Russia is going to feel about having a NATO ally in their front yard? That's not going to go over well. So the talking point of Russia, starting it, it comes with propaganda, but there's just the devil being the devil. We'll just leave it at that.
And amend its constitution to permanently ban NATO membership. The proposal offers security guarantees, framing attacks on Ukraine as if it's an attack on America. In fact, it goes beyond that. It's as if it's an attack on the entire transatlantic community. So it would trigger a collective military response. That's what the deal says. There are economic provisions in the deal that call for redirecting $100 billion in frozen Russian assets towards rebuilding Ukraine. It's lifting sanctions on Russia in a phased way. A joint U.S.-Russia venture in AI and mining and energy. Plus,
and that's another thing happening over in Ukraine. It's becoming a hub of AI. Secretly, it's openly, but secretly, it's becoming an AI hub, of the NWO. Okay.
Russia coming back to the G8. So it really integrates Russia back with the global economy when it comes to business and stuff like that. And again, this is why I say look out, because I guarantee you Witkoff and Kushner and Trump himself are probably going to financially profit off this. It mandates amnesty for wartime actions by all parties. So in other words, if all the Russian war criminals and Putin himself, they would totally get away scot-free. It requires Ukraine to hold elections within 100 days and enforces non-aggression pacts alongside cultural programs denouncing Nazi ideology. Okay. The plan recognizes Crimea, Luhansk,
Let you know that those are small hats.
Donetsk, and parts of the Kherson region as Russian. I mean, that's basically the gist of what it is. Now, the story gets darker. So, in my opinion, there's already things in here that are just insane that I would never agree to, right? To give up more territory than even what Russia currently has is like, what? That's, okay. But ready for this? Look at this. So, Nick Schifrin says the following. He's with NewsHour. After talking to Secretary Rubio, Senator Rounds announces that the 28-point plan was a Russian document, not a U.S. document. Here's what one of the senators said. Secretary Rubio did make a phone call to us this afternoon. I think he made it very clear to us that we are the recipients of a proposal that was delivered to one of our representatives. It is not our recommendation. It is not our peace plan. It is a proposal that was received, and as an intermediary, we have made arrangements to share it, and we did not release it. It was leaked. It was not released by our members or our representatives. This is an opportunity to receive it, and that it has been utilized and delivered to the Ukrainians, and that they will have an opportunity to respond. And in doing so, you now have one side being presented and the opportunity for the other side to respond. So as Midas Touch says, so Trump was threatening Ukraine to sign a deal that was fully created by Russia. Caroline Leavitt kept touting this as a good plan. This is a bombshell scandal. So here is the order of events. Ready? Plan leaks. U.S. confirms the plan is real. Some senators condemn the plan. Senators say Rubio calls them, denies it's a real plan. Then the White House denies that denial and says it's a real plan. Then Rubio says, yes, it is a real starting plan. Straight from Russia, sent to Ukraine. You need to accept these terms. After Trump already made Ukraine sign away like half of their shit from now until forever. This is insane, bro. This is insane. And I guarantee you, even in a scenario where they try to force on Ukraine the terms of this deal, right? This shit is not going to last. There's no way the deal's going to last. It's going to be just like the Gaza deal. It's going to be a fake peace deal. Because people ultimately, they're not just looking for a peace agreement. You need some semblance of justice and sanity and rationality in the agreement. It can't be so immensely one-sided, and it can't be forced.
All right, so you can look up more on that. But this is where we are. More EU, all right, and America friction, okay? And I typed in here, just to look it up to show you the division. I said, why is it so much tension between EU and America if they're an ally? All right, it says that's a really good question. Even though the EU and the US are strong allies, there are real and growing tensions between them right now. And here are some. Different visions for Ukraine. The U.S. recently put forth a 28-point peace plan for Ukraine that many European leaders think is too favorable to Russia. For example, it includes major territorial concessions. Okay. Europeans are especially worried about provisions that limit Ukraine's military size, which weaken Ukraine's future security. There's also frustration that the plan was not negotiated enough with European or NATO leaders. Okay, security dependency and European defense autonomy. Many in Europe are pushing to reduce their reliance on U.S. military support. See that? Because it comes with a whole hell of a lot of their money going to the budget, just so Babylon can go and pretty much start all of these wars and do what they do. All right, the hammer of the earth. For example, the EU's Readiness 2030 strategy aims to boost EU defense capabilities and encourage more buying of European-made weapons. Okay, and I have an article on that, I believe. Okay, what the hell? The EU wants to break its security dependency on the U.S. and buy more European weapons. Okay. And this is what we read about in the book of Obadiah. Let's go back there. Okay. The men that were at peace with thee are looking for a way around you. All right. Obadiah verse 7. Your allies will turn against you. They will help to chase you from your land. Okay. And as we're going to show you in Revelation, the 17th chapter. Okay. The EU nations are going to turn on Babylon. All right, as they're going to be forced, because as things, as you know, let's just say America, takes away, its presence, and the EU has to depend on their own military and their own weaponry. Okay, well, eventually they're going to be a sitting duck. They're not ready to go to war with Russia. So what they're going to do is side with Russia prophetically, as many of these countries are doing. They will promise you peace, okay, in this European and in this, confederacy they have, while plotting to deceive and to destroy you. Your trusted friends will set traps for you, and you won't even know about it. At that time, not even, all right, a single wise person will be left in the whole land of Edom, all right, Babylon. Basically, the Lord has a reprobate spirit on the leaders of Babylon, leading them to do things that are not conducive, all right, to its kingdom and its stability. So the EU wants to break its security dependency on the US and buy more European weapons. And of course, what will Babylon do? They will laugh at that. They will mock at that. You're nothing without us. Because remember, America's look is more stout. Okay. Going back here, just to show you a few things that are going on. All right. It says some NATO and EU officials worry that the EU might build defense structures that compete with NATO, which is historically US led. Okay. There's a broader strategic question. How independent should Europe be, especially when the US commitment can be unpredictable? So there is, it's volatile. It's not this strong alliance that it once was. Burden sharing and military spending pressure. The U.S. has long pushed NATO allies to spend more on defense, according to recent EU and NATO reports. This remains a point of friction because Europe is under pressure to do more for its own defense. Some leaders see the U.S. as expecting too much without enough shared cost. Okay. Competing global priorities. The U.S. under the Trump administration seemed to be shifting its focus towards its own borders in Asia. All right. Everybody's preparing for war. Okay. It says, which makes some European countries concerned about U.S. Role being reduced in European security because they rely heavily on Babylon. At the same time, Europe is trying to chart its own path on global security and economic issues that can lead to misalignment when big decisions are on the table. All right. Peace plans, defense strategies, lust, and legitimacy concerns. European leaders have expressed concerns that U.S. proposals for Ukraine could undermine European strategic interests or bypass European input. Some former NATO officials say these strains could, in the long run, erode the coherence of the transatlantic alliance. Okay. So the war in Ukraine, which again, those are small hats. The scriptures say, let's get it here real quick. Let's do it like this, because we got to come back here to the Daniel 2. But the least of the flock, okay, which is not just Israel, but Ukraine, as you can see, they're at the point of contention. Okay, Jeremiah 49:20. Therefore, hear the counsel of the Lord that he have taken against Edom, and his proposals that he have proposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And you can see the least of the flock. Okay. And when you look up this word least, right, I'll show you something, which I've brought it out before. Because when you deal with the state of Israel and these small hats, pretty much, they became what they are. It started, around the 1800s, where they started to take some of the go from Europe and different parts of Germany and Poland to Israel, the first Aliyah, the second Aliyah, so forth. But in 1948, the Balfour Declaration and everything like that, Tazayar, all right, little, insignificant, young, little, insignificant, mean, youngest, and they were established last. All right. And I always bring this out. It happens to have 1948 because on May 14th or May 15th, 1948, all right, the state of Israel was established, all right, which is not a biblical fulfillment of the true biblical Israelites returning back to that land, but it does fulfill prophecy, okay, that they would be in that land. And they're at the center of all kind of, friction and tension, okay? And through them, all right, World War III will be started, okay? So we are living in a time of biblical prophecy being fulfilled, all right, on a high level through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Okay, so the EU and America have tension. Okay, the US EU tech tension, escalation or diffusion. Okay, so in an August 25th Truth Social post, Donald Trump wrote that he would retaliate against countries that impose digital regulations on U.S. countries or companies. Retaliatory measures would include substantial tariffs and export restrictions on chips. These threats have heightened fears globally about the ability of foreign countries to maintain sovereign jurisdiction over domestically used technologies. So as you can see, they're divided. Okay, and this is what we were just reading here in prophecy. Okay, let's read it again. Daniel 2:41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part potter's clay and part iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of iron. All right, the sword, for as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. So it's partly strong, all right, the sword, but economically it's broken. The AI, it's all over the place. So it's strong and broken, which a kingdom divided can't stand. All right, the elites disagree on a lot. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, going throughout the four corners of the earth, and also, when you go to early Europe, using marriages to, set up strongholds and, economic hitmen to take over governments, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Let's read this in the NLT. It says, the mixture of iron and clay also shows that these kingdoms would try to strengthen themselves by forming alliances with each other through intermarriage. And if you go to early Europe, marriage was a big part of a lot of these alliances. But they will not hold together, just as iron and clay do not mix. So they're not going to bind together. And see, it says in verse 44, in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. So the return of the Lord is through the fall of this revival of Rome. Okay. Another thing I wanted to bring out here. All right. Colonel Doug McGregor, Germany will leave NATO. Which this is big. Okay. Germany will leave NATO. So you see nothing but division. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much division happening amongst these devils. All right. As they try to, they always like to point at, Chicago and the hood. Well, they do, they're infighting and, they love to point out black on black crime, which, we're not here to, throw a pity party for the 2/3. They're guilty. All right. But you devils also have Edom on Edom crime. Remember, the scriptures say, I will set Egyptian against Egyptian. Let's get that. Let's get that in the book of Isaiah, the 19th chapter. Okay. And we know that that's talking about America, which will get some Egyptian against Egyptian as well, as MaGa is falling apart. Right. Isaiah 19:2, and I will set Egyptian against Egyptian, and they shall fight everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city and kingdom against kingdom. And this is what we're witnessing. Okay, let's get this out of here. get that out of there. Boom, get that out of there. Okay, get this out of there. And we'll start here, okay?
Von der Leyen is now running the European Union now. I don't think she's going to last much longer because I think everybody's had it up to here, with the European Union. Here's what needs to be understood.
And you just know that this dude just had a shot of whiskey. Okay? He knows they're at the end. Every time you see him, all right, because he's an insider, he's rubbed elbows with a lot of these high-level devils. He knows that we're at the end of the road for the Edomite hegemon, all right, or hegemony throughout the earth.
Or everything well, let's put it this way. This war in Ukraine is lost, and that's going to become patently obvious, and the Russians are going to be victorious. They're going to dictate the terms under which the map is redrawn and new actors emerge.
Because remember, again, Ukraine was a part of the USSR Soviet Union, but after it disbanded, Ukraine became independent. All right, and again, the NATO set its eyes, on taking over that territory. So it's a lot of history that goes into that. All right, but when you look at the Western media, it's always going to be the narrative that, Russia is the aggressor, Russia this, Russia that. Okay. But really, they fear the resurgence of the USSR, Soviet power, which that was the reason NATO was created. And since the USSR disbanded, NATO under, America's leadership has been the beast, the dominant power in the earth. But that's waning. That influence is all waning for the sake of biblical prophecy, because Babylon the Great is getting ready to be attacked on a level we have never seen before.
But there's something even more important than what happens in Ukraine. And I predict that Germany will walk out of NATO and walk out of the EU because it's the old.
Salakia. Let's rewind it to the beginning.
Von der Leyen is now running the European Union now. I don't think she's going to last much longer because I think everybody's had it up to here, with the European Union. Here's what needs to be understood. Before everything well, let's put it this way. This war in Ukraine is lost, and that's going to become patently obvious, and the Russians are going to be victorious. They're going to dictate the terms under which the map is redrawn and new actors emerge. But there's something even more important than what happens in Ukraine, and I predict that Germany will walk out of NATO and walk out of the EU because it's the only way for Germany to liberate itself from the oppressive influence and power of the EU and NATO. Remember, many of your guests have said this, and people always chuckle over it. I always thought it was deeply offensive and thought it was dead wrong. But this was the attitude in Great Britain and France and the United States, and that is NATO exists to keep the Russians out and the Germans down. Well, the Germans are finally emerging from this state of Stockholm syndrome that they've been living in for decades, where the German walks in a room and his head is bowed and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're bad, and we know we're bad, and how much money do you want?"
Because of the small hat and that history tied to, Hitler and all of that.
That's over. The Germans have had it with that. The new generation that's coming up is sick of it. The alternative for Germany is sick of it. And this Atlantic alliance has not produced security for Germany. It's dragged Germany into a confrontation with Russia that most Germans want nothing to do with.
Right.
So Germany is going to march up.
The least of the flock shall draw them out. See? The influence of the small hats is leading many of these European nations to conflict that they don't want to be involved in. So when it's all said and done, many of these European nations prophetically are going to side with Russia. Ezekiel 38.
Out of the EU, it's going to march out of NATO. When that happens, that's the end of NATO and the EU, because
listen to that again.
Of NATO. When that happens, that produced security for Germany. It's dragged Germany into a confrontation with Russia that most Germans want nothing to do with. So Germany is going to march out of the EU. It's going to march out of NATO. When that happens, that's the end of NATO and the EU, because the only way they can exist is with Germany as the linchpin, as the keystone in the edifice. Once the Germans say enough and walk, it's over. And that's where we're headed. So this entire war in Ukraine, that was launched to destroy Russia and was always linked to the idea. And this goes back to the White House in 2020 when I was in there and I wrote a paper on it and it was given to the president. And he just, I don't think he could even imagine it, but it was an argument against disrupting relations with Germany because of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And I tried to outline the hundreds of years of very profitable and productive relations between Russia and the German-speaking peoples based on an exchange of commodities, commercial relationships. And the elites actually got along very well. If you go back over the last 300 or 400 years of history involving Germany and Russia, the two world wars are anomalies. They should never have happened. And they did happen. It's tragic that they did. But I think both Germans and Russians have concluded this must not happen again.
Right. And after the World War II, Europe was, supposedly got itself together. But, you see the Dutch is mad. I'm German and I'm sick of this shit, out of EU, out of NATO, out of who. No war with Russia. Oh, man. So this is prophetic. Okay. This is prophetic. Let's get the book of Jeremiah 51. All right. I thought I had it up. Let's get Jeremiah 51. Okay. And 27. Let's start at 25. Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, Babylon the Great, saith the Lord, which destroyeth all the earth. And I will stretch out mine hand upon thee, and roll thee down from the rocks, and I will make thee a burnt mountain. This is what's coming for Babylon the Great. And they shall not take thee a stone for a corner, nor a stone for foundations, but thou shalt be desolate forever, saith the Lord. So, nations that once depended on you, and you were, the more stout of your Edomite counterparts, in Europe and, so forth, you're not going to be for a stone for a corner. Okay. Which that's what holds the building together. All right. Like Yahweh Shai is the chief cornerstone. Okay. Where everything is built around that. Well, America was that for the Edomite, hegemon. Okay, if you let's look up the word hegemon. All right, hegemony definition is leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group, all right, over others. See that? So that was Babylon. Jeremiah 51 and 27. Set ye up a standard in the land, blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nations against her, call together, all right, against her the kingdoms of Ararat. All right. Ararat is Turkey. Okay. Ararat is Turkey. Mini or Armenia, Ashkenaz, Germany. Okay. These were, the Japhetic lands that, were taken over by Esau. Okay. Appoint a captain against her, cause the horses to come up as the rough caterpillars. So Ararat, Turkey. Okay. Mini, Armenia, Ashkenaz. You say the Ashkenazi Jew. All right. That goes to small hats that came from the area of Germany, Poland, and so forth. All right. And went over to, a region of the promised land and said that they, and when they were, that whole thing was set up with the Balfour Declaration and all of that. Right. But Ashkenaz, all right, Turkey, which those are, the parts of NATO, right? Ashkenaz in Germany is also a part of the EU. They're going to turn on, all right, Babylon, and they're going to join this captain against her, which is Russia. Prepare against her with the nation of the kings of the Medes. The king of the Medes symbolizes what? Okay, the Russia, because when you look up an ancient USSR map, it is in the territory of the ancient Medes, where they ruled out of, which the Medes were a Japhetic people. Okay, the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay, the USSR borders the territory where the Medes ruled. So prophetically, when you see the Medes, all right, for an example, let's get Isaiah 13. Let's just type it in like that. It was Isaiah the 13th chapter. All right. Isaiah 13 and 17. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them. All right. Japhet has no play in end time prophecy. It's speaking of those who would be ruling out of this territory in the latter days. Okay. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver. As for gold, they shall not delight in it. And I thought I had like a damn map. Let me see if I can find it. I thought I had it. Let's see here. I thought I had it, but okay, I think this is it right here. Boom. Although I would say it was a little bit lower. Okay, the Medes, when you look at a ancient USSR map, okay, it borders the territory where the Medes ruled out of. And the USSR is what? The Soviet Union, Russia, who was once dominant, right? So when you see Medes in end time prophecy, right, the Medes are speaking of Russia. Behold, I stir up the Medes against them, all right, and they're clearly stirred up against Babylon, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. All right, they're also a part of the BRICS, which are looking for ways around the dollar for trading. See that? So the Jeremiah 51 and 11. All right. Make bright the arrows, gather the shields. The Lord have raised up the spirit of the king of the Medes, for his device is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord and the vengeance of his temple. So the Lord has all of these things happening because he is getting ready to deal with our enemies. We can't fight against them ourselves, so he's going to have them fight against each other. Okay? So Jeremiah 51 and 28, prepare against her the nation with the kings of the Medes, the captains thereof, and all rulers thereof, and all the land of his dominion. The land shall tremble in sorrow for every purpose of the Lord that they have performed against Babylon, to make the land of Babylon desolate without an inhabitant. And this is how you know this ain't talking about ancient the ancient, all right, Neo-Babylonian Empire. This is speaking of Babylon the Great. That will be destroyed, all right, and it won't be an inhabitant. This is something coming in the future. So Germany, all right, is going to leave NATO and the EU. Turkey is going to leave NATO. Okay, these are key factors in end time prophecy. Okay, let's see if we can just type in real quick what's going on with Turkey. Turkey NATO tensions. Let's just see what comes up. Okay, so it's all, here you go. You can look it up. Okay, allies at odds, mapping the drivers of Turkey, NATO tensions between 1991 and 2023. And Turkey has always played both sides. Okay. Turkey walking the tightrope between NATO, Russia, and Ukraine. Okay. You can look it up. All right. And Turkey, you know, although they haven't left NATO, the notion is out there. Okay. Key points of contention include its purchase of Russian S-400 air defense systems, sustained energy, and economic ties with Russia and China, independent military operations in Syria and Iraq, and military threats against NATO members and allies. So you see that? Which this is Ezekiel the 38th chapter happening right before our eyes. Okay? Is Turkey Israel next target in the Middle East? You see what the, you know? And what is America going to do? America's going to defend Israel. Okay? So what's going to happen is all of these countries are going to side with Russia. That's what we're reading about here in Jeremiah, the 51st chapter. They're going to align themselves with the king of the Medes. Call Halal Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai.
And Germany will leave the Atlantic Alliance, and it will leave the EU for these very reasons. And all the neocons that have done everything they possibly could to promote death and destruction and war in Eastern Europe and across the continent. These are the same people who have pushed these migrations, heavily funded by people like Soros and others, who couldn't wait to shove millions and millions of people into Europe who are not Europeans, will never be Europeans, cannot become Europeans, and don't want to be Europeans. They are all going to stand around and then begin to say, see, the Germans are evil. They're back at it again. They're evil because they're charting their own course. They've decided on their own future. It's a lot of nonsense. There's no Nazi revival there, nor will there ever be one, in my judgment. But what you see out in eastern Ukraine, for some reason, these same neocons are happy to see these Ukrainian soldiers sport SS emblems in their war with Russia, which makes no sense at all. None.
Yeah, that is something that didn't get much. It did get a little bit of press, but the significance seemed to be lost on people. I guess because they're like, no, I can't acknowledge that because then that would mean we can't support Zelensky because he seems okay with it. But I tell you, one person that's not okay with it, and going back to that interview with Viktor Orban.
Okay, and also I forgot to do this. Let's just type in Ashkenaz, Germany. All right. Ashkenaz is the Hebrew name for Germany. And the term refers to the historical Jewish community that emerged in the Middle Ages. These were the small hats. These Ashkenazi Jews, which they're not saying they're descendants of Japhet. They're saying that their forefathers were Jews in the region of Germany, all right, who came over to what they call the Promised Land, okay? The Ashkenaz is not them claiming the heritage of Japhet. It doesn't make sense to be, all right, Japhetic and Shemitic. They're claiming to be, all right, Jews, all right, that have their roots in Ashkenaz, which is territory that belonged to Japhet. For you guys out there, you see Ashkenaz and you just all of a sudden, oh, see, the Japhet is the white man. No. Ain't what that's talking about. See, but prophecy is hitting, man.
He was also asked specifically about what chances does the Ukraine army, with the SS or not, what chance do they have?
European politics intellectually is very sophisticated, but what they are saying basically means that they would not like to have a peace just now. They would like to continue the war. They think, and they speak about it publicly, that we have to continue the war to support Ukraine more. The situation will improve on the front line, and we will have a better circumstances or preconditions for negotiation. Wrong, totally wrong. Not to speak about geopolitics and human dimension, economically and financially is just crazy. We finance a country which has no chance to win the war, but at the same time, there's a high level of corruption.
Yeah, now obviously that issue with corruption has exploded since he made those comments. You mentioned at the outset, one of Zelensky's right-hand man has been caught and is now somewhere in hiding. And it's
he's in Israel, along with another one. They both fled to Israel. They will be safe there.
I wonder why will people from Ukraine be safe in Israel?
For now, but if Zelensky falls, it's unclear how long they're going to protect him.
Oh, listen, I think they're going to be safe. Remember the gentleman who was a pedophile who was caught out in Las Vegas? I can't remember his name now, but it turns out he was an Israeli citizen, and he was flown immediately to Israel, where he is safe and will never be extradited. No, I think
so. Their own tongue is falling on themselves.
I think the Jewish state will remain a haven for Jews, regardless of what they do anywhere else in the world. And that's certainly true for the two gentlemen that whose names escaped me. One, I think, is Mindich or something.
Yeah, Mindich, yeah.
And the other one, I can't remember his name. But, at some point, Zelensky will probably pack it in and go there as well.
Well, yeah, because I was going to say, and I'm talking to some folks who are on the ground in Kiev or have access there.
Letting you know that they are small hats.
And they're saying he is literally at risk. This could knock him out when nothing else do it. So apparently he's not as safe as many in the West may think, even with all these announcements.
Well, a lot of people have waited for him to be subjected to the Mussolini treatment. That may yet come. Who knows? He is distant from his own population.
So let's do this. Let's type in. All right. how could so I just typed in, it's just a roundabout question, see what it says, because chat has changed. You know, they're getting more control of it. But I said, how could Ukraine and Israel lead, all right, to World War III amongst nations like Russia, America, etc.? Let's see what it says. See what it says. You're listening anyway. All right, they're listening to everything. Here's a clear, sober explanation of how conflicts in Ukraine, Israel, Gaza could theoretically escalate into a wider global conflict. Not predicting World War III, but explaining the pathways. All right. Why these two wars are dangerous flashpoints. Ukraine war, Russia versus NATO, support for Ukraine. Okay. This conflict is already the largest conventional war in Europe since World War II. All right, direct NATO-Russia collision. All right, yada, yada, yada. Nuclear threats. Israel-Hamas war. So it's a lot, all right? And, you know, I don't feel like really reading through it all, but as you can see, I'll read through it, you know. I'll read through it and probably do another lesson, but, yeah. The least of the flock, right, could draw out all of these various different nations to war. And that's what the book of Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, is centered around. Okay? All of these nations join hand in hand with Russia, which that's what Germany's going to eventually do. See if he mentions it, but I don't think he will. Let's see.
What no one here in the West is told, and you can only hear this from people who are on the ground over there, or Poland, or in Russia. There are some Germans that will tell you this. I think one of them is named Baba. This was a German journalist. I listened to him, and he said the same thing. The population has turned decisively against this war with Russia. They know this has to end before there's anything left. I mean, that's where they're headed right now. And the other thing is that Ukrainians living in the western part of Ukraine are also coming around to understanding that whether we like it or not, that government that emerges after this war in Kiev must be friendly to Russia. If it isn't, the Russians will march all the way to where we are, right up to the border with Poland, if necessary, to secure their country. We have never recognized Russia's legitimate national security interests in Poland, or excuse me, in Ukraine. Right. Never done it. And we don't seem to understand, as a result, we, more than anybody else, are responsible for this bloodletting. You know, if there was a humanitarian bone in Donald Trump's body, on the basis of what's happened thus far, he would lower the boom and say, Mr. Zelensky, you're finished. You're out. However, I suspect that the same billionaires that are calling the shots in Washington in terms of policy towards the Middle East and towards Iran are also calling the shots in Ukraine. And these billionaires have decided that they want Zelensky there, and they want to continue doing whatever they can to harm Russia. That's their agenda. That's not.
So this is where we are. All right. Now, another point of division, all right, is at the G20 meeting, which was held in South Africa. You know, Babylon didn't show up because supposedly, you know, they're mad about, you know, the white farmers getting oppressed by the South Africans and all of that rhetoric, which the new prime minister of Canada, he was like, man, to hell with that. He's a South African. He's like, to hell with that. You know, although we know how the Edomites got over there in South Africa, apartheid and all of that, but the Lord has a new prime minister, you know, after Trudeau, you know, the Trudeau fiasco, which he probably did too much wickedness and had to go underground for a minute. Now you have this new guy, Prime Minister Carney, all right, which he used the G20 stage to urge planetary unity in emerging world government. All right. But look what he says. We don't need the U.S. anymore. All right. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney used the G20 stage in Johannesburg to call for a new world order defined by a global governance that excludes the United States and counterbalances American influence in the world. And see, this is also Jeremiah 51. And let's see here. The nation shall not flow. Jeremiah 51 and 44. Call Halal Yahweh Shem Yahshai, and I will punish Baal and Babylon, and I will bring forth out of his mouth that which he swallowed up, and the nation shall not flow together any more unto him. Yea, the wall of Babylon shall fall. Okay, so you see these NATO and EU countries are now, they're standing up to the one who was more stout. Okay, and let's listen to this. Okay. Trump humiliated at G20. Canada and Korea take the global stage.
There are days, my friends, when the news just feel kind of like a prank. Today, for a moment, I honestly thought that I misread the headlines. Canada and Korea building alliances to the G20, while the US under Trump is off somewhere haggling with Russia. Honestly, what are we even doing anymore? What is even going on here? In this video, I want to show you how the rest of the world is simply moving on without the US at the center, why Canada and Korea of all nations are suddenly steering the conversation, and why America, or at least Trump's America, is being left out in the cold. We'll look at three themes: how the G20 revealed a new global reality, what Trump's shadow diplomacy with Russia says about American decline, and the quiet way everyday people, even food culture, are leaving old superpowers behind. Before we dive in, a very quick note, but hard to overstate the symbolism. Canada and Korea, not the United States, out front at the G20, forging deals, forming coalitions, drawing up new maps of influence, and the United States is absent in any meaningful way, except, of course, for the photo ops with Russia. Mark Carney, Canada's prime minister, and a figure who in another era might have been seen as a junior partner to Washington, stood up and said almost flatly, the world can move on without the US. And he's kind of right, right? The G20 this year represented 3/4 of humanity, literally 2/3 of global GDP, 3/4 of global trade, all of it without the US at the center. Now, there is a strange dignity in watching a country like Canada, so often cast as America's polite neighbor, gently but firmly state that there is another table and everyone is invited except the loudest guest. Korea, too, no longer content to be the world's factory, now shaping culture, commerce, even cuisine, with a kind of confidence that feels almost subversive. And meanwhile, America's old friends are recalibrating. It's not anger, it's not even rebellion. It's the slow, deliberate walk away from somebody who keeps showing up late, drunk on their own power, insisting the party can't start without them. To think clearly.
You hear that? America was of the opinion that the party can't start without them. Well, this is a new day. Okay, they're bringing about that NWO, and we told you the elites are, they're done. America has done what it needed to do. All right, but we're reaching a new point. Okay, when things are getting ready to get interesting.
Here, you have to hold two conflicting ideas at once. America still has immense power, but power that alienates isn't the same as leadership that attracts. The world isn't waiting for permission anymore. Now, if you want a single scene that captures the mood, picture this. As the G20 quietly redraws global alliances, Trump's people are sitting in Miami with Russian envoys, hammering out a Ukraine plan so lopsided it may as well have been faxed in from Moscow. This is not just bad optics, I have so much to say on this topic. It's a reversal for decades of American foreign policy. The supposed deal being floated would force Ukraine to cede territory, shrink its military, and ban NATO troops, essentially a wish list written in Cyrillic, presented to Zelensky with an ultimatum: take it or lose US support. Come on. If you're Canadian, Korean, or frankly from any country that remembers the 20th century, this moment is chilling in its historical resonance. For years, the United States was the anchor of Western society, the voice in the room that kept the darkness at bay. Now it's a shadow, negotiating with adversaries in broad daylight, asking allies to take it or leave it. I can't help but imagine the ghosts of old Republicans, Reagan, Eisenhower, staring in disbelief. It's the kind of reversal that punishes both emotional thinking and apathy. You want to look away, the consequences won't really let you. And here's what most remarkable in my opinion: the rest of the G20 barely flinched. European leaders, Canada, Japan, and the so-called Group of Seven simply issued their own statement, rejecting territorial concessions, reaffirming Ukraine's right to defend itself, and moving forward without waiting for US approval. A good critical thinker doesn't just ask what happened, but who benefits from you reacting a certain way. If Trump's America is willing to act as Russia's back channel, what does that mean for anyone who still believes in the old alliances? The rest of the world is just not waiting to find out. Now, amid all of this geopolitic drama, something else is shifting almost invisibly. Power these days isn't just military or economic, it's also cultural. It's soft power, the kind that makes people want to buy your products, watch your shows, or taste your food. And I think Korea understands this. While American diplomats are busy issuing threats and tariffs, Korean delegations are teaching the world to cook, literally. At the G20, Korea's first lady is running cooking demos in South Africa, part culture.
So as you can see, America's losing its influence. America's on its way out, man. And prophetically, when you get Revelation, the 17th chapter, okay, which we have a lesson on this whole chapter. Okay, Revelation 17 and 12. Let's see here. Let's just jump. Okay, here we are. Yep, Revelation 17 and 13. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So these European nations gave, their strength to the beast system to forward Babylon, but now, they're seeking to do their own thing, okay, or looking out for themselves as pertaining to this new world order. These shall make war with the Lamb. All of these nations are going to make war with Yahweh Shai upon his return. Okay, so it's not like they're righteous, Russia included. All right, but the Lord is using them for a very important part of prophecy. And the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are people and multitude and nations and tongues. As we were reading in Jeremiah 51, everything flowed through Babylon. Okay. Let's see here. Jeremiah 51 and 44. And I will punish Baal in Babylon, and I will bring forth all out of his mouth which he swallowed up. And the nation shall not flow together any more unto him. Yea, the wall of Babylon shall fall. Okay. And as you see here, Babylon the Great, all right, was the dominant force, all right, where everything flowed through, all right. Revelation 17 and 16, and the 10 horns, all right, the EU, all right, which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God hath put it in their heart to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, and to the words of God shall be fulfilled. And we're at that point where the Lord is getting ready to break this thing up. Okay, America is done. The way it's looked at, the stench of it, the memorial of it, it's not what it once was. The influence of it is not what it once was. And the Lord is putting leadership in Babylon to just make things worse. Okay, now let's go here as well. Okay, let's see here. Everything's collapsing. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I've always represented the common American man and woman as a member of the House of Representatives, which is why I've always been despised in Washington, D.C., and just never fit in. Americans are used by the political industrial complex of both political parties, election cycle after election cycle, in order to elect whichever side can convince Americans to hate the other side more. And the results are always the same. No matter which way the political pendulum swings, Republican or Democrat, nothing ever gets better for the common American man or woman. The debt goes higher. Corporate and global interests remain Washington's sweethearts. American jobs continue to be replaced, whether it's by illegal labor or legal labor by visas or just shipped overseas. Small businesses continue to be swallowed by big corporations. Americans' hard-earned tax dollars always fund foreign wars, foreign aid, and foreign interest. And the spending power of the dollar continues to decline. The average American family can no longer survive on a single breadwinner's income, as both parents have to work in order to simply survive. And today, many in my children's generation feel hopeless for their future and don't think they will ever realize the American dream. And that breaks my heart. There is no plan to save the world or a 4D chess game being played. When common American people realize and understand that the political industrial complex of both parties is ripping this country apart, that not one elected leader like me is able to stop Washington's machine from gradually destroying our country, and instead the reality is that they, common Americans, the people, possess the real power over Washington, then I'll be here by their side to rebuild it. Until then, I'm going back to the people that I love, to live my life to the fullest as I always have, and I look forward to a new path ahead. I'll be resigning from office with my last day being January 5th, 2026, And I look forward to seeing many of you again sometime in the future. May God bless you all. And may
So you do Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was once MaGa, right, is jumping ship, and like they said, something is up, you know, because this is the devil, right? The Bible speaks of this is an Edomite. Okay, they're up to something, but they're divided too at the same time. Alex Jones himself. Okay, this is another one.
All right, guys, got some amazing news here. So Doge is officially cooked. It is done. It is over. It's a wrap. So here's some reporting from Reuters. Exclusive. Doge doesn't exist with 8 months left on its charter. They say U.S. President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency has disbanded with 8 months left to its mandate, ending an initiative launched with fanfare as a symbol of Trump's pledge to slash the government size, but which critics say delivered few measurable savings. Quote, that doesn't exist. Office of Personnel Management Director Scott Cooper told Reuters earlier this month when asked about Doge's status. It's no longer a centralized entity, Cooper added in the first public comments from the Trump administration on the end of Doge. The agency set up in January made dramatic forays across Washington in the early months of Trump's second term to rapidly shrink federal agencies, cut their budgets, or redirect their work to Trump priorities. So let me just pause to point out, every single thing they did, everything they did was wildly, wildly illegal, and it's not even close. You had the world's richest man hacking into the Treasury, deleting whatever he wanted to delete. By the way, the other piece of speculation is that the whole point of this exercise was for him to steal all of our data for his AI system, which, again, wildly, wildly illegal. So he left a trail of devastation and destruction, while at the same time somehow managing to not save any actual money in the long run. So they continue here and say, the OPM, the federal government's Human Resources Office, has since taken over many of Doge's functions. According to Cooper and documents reviewed by Reuters, at least 2 prominent Doge employees are now involved with the National Design Studio, a new body created through an executive order signed by Trump in August. So
they're through. He is through, man. I mean, everything is falling apart. Even Alex Jones.
So as you all know, Marjorie Taylor Greene decided to resign the other day, and that came as a surprise to a lot of people. And I get it. It makes sense that some people are shocked, but I have to be honest, I was not that surprised. And I wasn't that surprised because she doesn't have a base anymore. There's no base for her anymore. A person who she just defended endlessly, turned on her and called her a traitor to the country. She was getting death threats. I don't think she wanted to spend the next however long, being a total simp to a guy who refers to her as a traitor. So I kind of get where she's coming from. Now, I think in the long run, I do think she's going to try to get back in politics. It's possible she just sort of taps out and says, I'm going into media. But I'm really more of the mindset she's either going to run for the Senate or she's going to run for president, maybe more likely president in 2028. She wants to be the future of MaGa. She wants to claim the mantle of, like, I'm the true MaGa. And she thinks she can stay relevant enough by, doing media until 2028. So that's my guess as to what's going on here. But I'm not surprised she wanted to go because she really put herself in a corner, right? I mean, and this is a tale as old as time. There's been, a dozen examples of Republican politicians who started to break with Trump. And then, once they do and he fires back, eventually they say, you know what, I'm out. I'm done. I'm not doing this again. Jeff Flake comes to mind. And like I said, there's literally like 10 or 12 others that, it was a Republican, stood up to Trump, then retired. So same kind of thing happened here. But what's extra crazy about it is that Marjorie Taylor Greene, she voted 95% or more with Trump. And even that is not okay. Why? Because God forbid you want the Epstein files released. God forbid you say some critical words of Israel. You are not welcome in the MaGa movement. Remember, Epstein is a Democratic hoax, but it's also totally real, but the Democrats are the only ones who are guilty. This is what he does. He contradicts himself all the time on it. But don't criticize Israel. Don't say you want to release the Epstein files. You're persona non grata. He's done with you.
Which Epstein is a small hat too, okay?
And so she ended up resigning. So first, let me give you a little reminder. Here is part of her resigning video.
So we already, showed you that. But Alex Jones, all right, which he tried his hardest to keep defending Trump, but
sees this. And Alex, he's been on this thing lately where it's like, we got to stop having a MaGa civil war. We got to come together. We got to get Nick Fuentes and Ben Shapiro to be buddy-buddy. We got to work it all out. Trump, why are you going after MTG? She's a loyal soldier. She's just saying, I disagree with you in a nuanced way on certain issues. So he's been out there trying to play peacemaker, sort of like a Matt Walsh role. Matt Walsh is getting cooked by the Groivers. And he's like, hey guys, why can't we all just get along? Why can't we all realize the common enemy is the left and let's just fight the left and stop?
See, MaGa's through. Esau's done, man. The Esau Edom is finished. He's finito. Okay? He's through. So the only thing he got left and going for him is that sword. Right? And he gonna draw it. All right? But they're gonna draw it on each other too. Okay?
going after me and Ben Shapiro, please. And the Groypers are like, fuck you fucking sell out, working for a Jew. Like, that's what's happening. So Alex Jones is playing a similar role to Matt Walsh. Hey guys, why can't we all get along? By the way, I love the idea that like Mr. fucking anti-establishment, Mr. conspiracy outsider guy is like playing fucking cheerleader and mediator from within the Republican tent. Like, the governing coalition of the country, the ultimate representative of the establishment is now Alex Jones. But he comes out, and now he's having a moment because, as you all know, Trump's approval rating very low, 36%. He's really losing his grip. The whole country is like fucking done with this guy. The economy is trash. He's starting all these new wars. So everybody's like, ugh, gross. So Alex Jones steps in here. He's like, I don't know. I think I might be turning on Trump. I'm really close to turning on Trump, y'all. Here, let's watch.
And I'm just going to say it point blank. I'm not a bandwagon person. I don't pile on other people who are doing something. But I know N.T.G. Wells is a woman of incredible integrity, brought up to be poor, self-made, very successful construction company, a woman of great integrity. She announced last night that she is resigning. I predicted on the Tuesday broadcast, she didn't tell me this, but I've talked to her at length. And it sounded to me like she was throwing in the towel just because she can't be part of something that's, quote, the lesser of two evils. And she's very popular in her district. Wins by some of the widest margins of anyone in Congress. And we'll play her statement here in a moment. But that ties into all of this. But I'm not saying this because of what she just did. I'm going to have to reflect on this, and I'm going to have to pray about it, and I'm going to take a few weeks on it, I think. It's the most important thing to do. But I'm not a person that is normally conflicted. I have a lot of knowledge, a lot of depth, a lot of sources, a lot of context. And when I do get conflicted on something, I just have to go to God with it and pray about it a lot. And then go to that place that King David talked about, the quiet place, the Most High. And then I'm going to make my decision. And if God tells me tonight, I'll make my decision. But I am seriously inches away from not supporting Trump anymore. Because I'm not going to watch him commit political suicide.
Alex, who are you kidding, bro? You're a little bitch. Your ass is going to fall right back in line. You can do a show. You know what? I'm done. I'm off the Trump train. He's causing all these problems. I don't agree with what he's doing here, and here. But like, homie, where in fucking... It is 2025. You're telling me nothing he's done between 2015 and 2025 for a fucking decade. None of it made you go, you know what? I'm out. I don't like that one too much. None of it? Nothing. Now it's, because MTG is resigning. Now, you went too far, Don. You went too dumb. So he didn't go too far when he killed increased overtime pay for millions of people that Biden did and he undid. He didn't go too far then. He didn't go too far when he killed the $15 minimum wage for federal contractors that Biden put in place. He didn't go too far when he opposed the PRO Act and minimum wage increases. He didn't go too far when he destroyed the NLRB with anti-union picks to protect his billionaire fucking donors. He didn't go too far when he destroyed the CFPB, the anti-scam police. He didn't go too far when he outsourced hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs. He didn't go too far when he just decided, I'm going to cut taxes on the rich and raise tax on the bottom 90% of Americans. He didn't go too far when 2.3 million people lost their health care in his first term, and he just kicked 17 million people off Medicaid in his second term. When he froze the food stamp money for fucking millions of people, at the same time he cut 94 million pounds of food going to food banks, starving Americans while giving $40 billion to Argentina, that didn't go too far. Bombing fishermen in the Caribbean day in and day out. Bombing Iran illegally. Bombing Somalia. Bombing Yemen. All illegal. That didn't go too far. None of that went too far. Fucking setting up concentration camps. Sending innocent people there where they get raped. That didn't go too far. You made MTG mad. And so I don't know. I'm really thinking about it, guys. I might actually do this. I might actually leave. No, you won't. Because we...
Hey, thou sayest, all right? Again, Isaiah 19:2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers and to them that have familiar spirits and to wizards. And the Egyptians will I give into the hand of a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them. And things are just going to get worse and worse and worse for Egypt, man. This place is through. Esau is through, man. Okay?
The Trump MaGa coalition is made up of two main different movements. The ideological MaGa base, which is perpetually confused, and the tech authoritarian crypto bros, who know exactly what they want. Well, J.D. Vance is the heir presumptive of Trump, who qualifies by being the only such figure who straddles both of those camps. So, in theory, you would say he should be well positioned to glide into a MAGA.
And J.D. Vance is set up by the technocrats. So the technocracy is coming very, very soon. See, Trump may not even make it, all right, to 2028. Okay? They're setting that technocracy up, which I got so much on that technocracy, but I wanted to hit these, hit these videos, Lord willing, tomorrow, or day after. I'll get into what they're doing with this technocracy. But yeah.
Presidency 2028. Coalition intact. Except that logically, those two halves have so little in common, say for Trump, you can just as easily argue the whole thing is a guaranteed train wreck. And that latter seems way more likely, because less than 1 year into Trump's second term, the strains are already showing big time. For example, President Trump is backing a plan to prevent the individual states of the United States of America from regulating artificial intelligence companies. According to the Financial Times, he's even said to be considering an executive order that would withhold federal funds from states that try to pass AI laws, which does sound like a very Trumpy thing.
So they're basically, you can't regulate AI, and if you do, you're gonna lose funding. You have a lot of states that are saying, "Wait a minute, this AI thing is going too far." Okay. So the Lord is destroying these devils from the inside out. All right.
To do. This is the deal with the big tech donors. They get crypto, under-regulated. They get to innovate all they want with AI, under-regulated. No stupid politicians interfering, stopping them from doing exactly what they want. Just one stupid politician giving them license to get on with it. Which is fine, except for traditional MAGA base, the ones who have been trained via the school of multiple conspiracy theories to distrust the elites. They're not happy about any of this. They are the ones disconcerted that Trump, having been elected on an affordability platform, has been doing anything but, and now seems to be playing catch-up. Add to that the whole Jeffrey Epstein fiasco and the ideological MAGA base are kind of trying to work out which components of their ideology Donald Trump even actually believes in and would remain consistent to.
True.
The answer being none at all, of course. But a cult of personality needs more than obvious reality to turn it around. So it's still a work in progress. They look at Trump's support for AI, and they just don't get it. The AI industry is doing plenty to make the tension all the sharper. Various stories have been widely reported about how everyone thinks we're in an AI bubble that may be about to burst and throw the global economy into crisis. So that kind of sets the mood. And then you add to that the stories about how the advent of AI will be throwing lots of ordinary people out of jobs. Kind of the opposite of Trump's stated policy of getting proper well-paid jobs for Americans. And those come from giant companies like Walmart and Amazon, warning their workers to expect their roles to be transformed or eliminated by AI. Then you have all the other stories of chatbot users committing suicide after various interactions with their chatbot went wrong. It's the sort of thing you would expect MAGA to turn against, in other words. Some MAGA-affiliated politicians are seeing their chance, using the issue to cleave to the base and against Trump. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, for instance, said the AI plan promoted by Trump was, quote, an insult to voters. And he complained that the proposal would, quote, prevent states from protecting against online censorship of political speech, predatory applications that target children, violations of intellectual property rights and data center intrusions on power/water resources. Except for tech bosses are shoveling large amounts of money Trump's way in one form or another, which is what talks a lot louder than anything else. Now that Trump is into the lame duck part of his presidency, other issues will be harder to ignore. For instance, under-regulation of AI has very low support amongst voters. According to a survey conducted by YouGov in June, just 18% of American voters supported efforts to stop states from being able to regulate it. Some Republicans in Congress have been warning that Trump's stand could be a vote loser for them. And as we know, if they believe that the laws of political gravity, as they've always known, are kicking back in after this surreal moment of the suspension of disbelief, they're going to pay a lot more attention to those voters more than they will even Donald Trump. And that must be keeping J.D. Vance awake at night, because he is the man who is the leading light, the standard bearer in a political sense, for the tech bros. The man who understands the principles that they're engaging with, who can deal with the sophisticated objectives and strategies. He just needs to avoid screwing up the MAGA base over the next couple of years or so, and of course with Trump himself, which is always on a knife edge. And as far as it's in his power to do so, preferably to prevent Trump from self-destructing the entire movement by doing something so dumb that even he can't get away with it. Can't say I fancy his chances. Democrats have been zoning in on Vance's relationship with Peter Thiel particularly, and the company that he leads, Palantir, which does the sort of things you would expect to make excellent framing for, shall we say, a corporate enterprise of your standard Bond villain. Uber MaGa guru Steve Bannon came close to that. He called Palantir a science fiction villain. Joe Rogan said Palantir was creepy. Nick Fuentes, who's currently living in the ideological purity end of the scale of awful, he said, seriously, if Palantir isn't the deep state, then what is? And Laura Loomer chimed in, accusing it of seeking to infiltrate the Trump administration to secure defense contracts, which is the sort of conspiracy theory that can actually be true. Sure.
So it was all a farce. The bidding of the elite is being done. The collapse in the American economy, constitution, is getting ready to get bad. You know, Esau Edom is, you know, he's through. And they're bringing in that technocracy. UK scared Starfish trips over his own feet as he arrives at G20. Let's see if they show it. Oh man. Oh man. Woo! Yo, second Edge 6 and 9. What does it tell you? Esau is the end of the world, man. Okay, and all kind of stuff is coming out on these devils, man. Okay, it's over. Okay, it's over for these devils, man. All right, man. So I just wanted to, you know, bring out those things. I'm glad I got through it because I felt terrible at the start, but spirit is a little upbeat now. Musk claims AI will make work optional and money irrelevant. I wonder what that can lead to. So, yeah. Beautiful times, man. Beautiful times, man. Through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, we hope, you know, you brothers and sisters were edified, man, because that's why we do these videos, man. But, wow. So what's up with all these Edomite teachers, you know, messing with students? Supposedly there's a hit out on Candace and West, too. Sam Altman's eye-scanning orb startup says employees should only care about work for the good of humanity. What the hell is going on, man? All right, so let me stop. Hopefully I'll edify it on to the next. Shalom.